because we are in Web3, it's almost impossible not to talk about 3.3, which 3.3 got very popular with Olympus DAO. I'm dying to talk about that. I'll give a little bit of context of what 3.3 is, if you have not known what is Olympus DAO. So Olympus DAO is a thought experiment proposed by Zeus, which talks about game theory to a certain extent. Within the game theory, he says that if everyone stakes together and not take out any funds, then everyone gets collectively rich together, right? That was the very initial premise of Olympus DAO. That was back in the last bull run, I think 2021. We all know what happened to Olympus DAO. There was a crash in price. So yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts about that. You can chime in to say, where is it oversimplified and where is the flaw in that to, treat Olympus DAO having such a significant fall in price from as a professor in math theory. What are your thoughts on 3.3?
I think that the Olympus DAO is an example of bad game theory. I believe that what I'm trying to do is something very similar to what I was showing here. The idea is that if you are patient and you can sacrifice short-term gains for future gains, so you just leave your money there and to earn more than the short-term reward of selling now. I think that's what I was trying to depict, or at least that's the one thing that I can understand that makes more sense. But kind of explanation for them was very bad, and there was a lot of mistakes along the way. Let me show you. I have here open on another tab a Medium post of the game theory of Olympus by their own Medium account, if I'm not mistaken. Now the game theory of Olympus. So let's go over here. So the simplest model of Olympus has two players with three possible actions: stake, buy, bond, and sell. And players are most likely to stake when they anticipate an expansion in supply and or price. Players are most likely to sell when they anticipate a contraction in supply and or price. And players are most likely to bond when they do not have a strong directional bias, but don't anticipate significant downside. So far, so good. Nothing really odd about this. But the things started to get a little bit more confusing here. He says that staking has the effect of pushing the price up +2. Very vague, doesn't really explains much of what that means. Selling has the effect of pushing the price down -2, and the player who moves price gets half of the benefit. Bonding has no price effect, but provides a discount of 1. And then with this very vague, very bare bones paragraph, he derives this matrix here. And this is already where I started to get some issues with what we are seeing, because the numbers here don't make sense. So surely the numbers that we see here in this matrix do not come from the logic that he talks on the previous two paragraphs. Because I try to really understand and make sense, and there is nothing here in these paragraphs that justify, for instance, the payoff dropping by 4 points when I'm selling. So I'm selling and my payoff is 1 if my opponent stake, 1 if my opponent bonds, but it drops to -3 if my opponent sells. Nothing really justifies that I should be getting a discount of 4 is here. Same thing, the number here, 3 shouldn't be 3, because if you think that, okay, the prices are neutral at 1-1, and then my opponent moves to stake while I'm still bonding, the price should be moving by 2, but I should be getting half of the benefit. It should be like 3. It should be +1 because it moves by 2, but I only get half of that, I think. So the numbers here to me, they don't really make a lot of sense. But in particular, the -1 to -3 is definitely wrong. So that's the first thing that I find that doesn't make sense in this little example. The other thing as well is that even if these numbers here made some sense, so reflected the logic that we see in these two paragraphs, they are missing a very important component, which is the marginal utility of money tends to be decreasing. The idea is that the more money you have, the less you care about. And in particular, this is why I think that Olympus, the most critical mistake and why they lost price so much, is that at some point, you don't care about seeing the numbers in your screen increasing. You want to be buying a house, you want to be buying dinner, and so on. So It's not always the case that you're going to have stake as being the best option for the players. At some point, you need to have them to sell. And in this little image here, you don't get to see that. So the narrative that they're trying to push Olympus is that players should always be staking no matter what. It's kind of like the idea of, yeah, let's just all buy and never selling, and we're going to be getting rich together. And this is weak logic. So that's my key problem with the Olympus 3.3 is that it's missing the components that tells you that people will want to be selling at some point. Selling cannot be always a dominated action because these numbers here should be getting smaller the more richer you are. And at some point, selling would start to look more appealing. And in particular, you can also see here that he plants the seed to that on this paragraph. He says that players are most likely to sell when they anticipate a contraction in supply or price. So they will sell if they anticipate down. And here he also says that selling has the effect of pushing the price down. So in other words, if I anticipate people to sell, selling should be my best action, should be my best response to other people selling. And you don't see this reflected here in this matrix. It should be the case that if my opponent is selling, my best action, the action that gives me the highest payoff, should be selling as well, if we are to take this logic here seriously. And you don't see this reflected in this matrix.
So you're saying that there are different snapshots as based on the different situation. Like before I buy in, there is a certain snapshots I have in my head, and then as compared to when I am in the game, there's a different numbers representation as when I'm in the game. This particular graph doesn't take into account the time, nor the scenario and situation that a certain person is in.
Yes. So there is a difference. As I mentioned before, when you're talking about payoffs in game theory, you have to factor in other aspects rather than just the money. You have to factor in psychological aspects. You have to factor in the utility of money, as I mentioned, and your other necessities. Even if it's true that if both players stake, they will be getting more money, it doesn't mean necessarily that the payoff will be higher if everyone stakes. Because at some point for me, I don't want to be getting more Olympus or whatnot. I'm so rich and I have bills to pay or I have a house, so I need to be converting this. So we should have different snapshots based on many different factors, like how much of the coin you have already, how rich you are already, what are your other demands. Say that my wife is sick, I need to be paying for her treatment. So that's also an prices as well of other assets. I can get something for Olympus, but oh my holy fuck, there is a sale going out of this asset that is severely underpriced. Getting a little bit of stake of gain from Olympus, it's not enough to be covering the huge gains that I could get if I just sell a little bit of Olympus and buy Bitcoin, say at a 90% discount, because someone is just going crazy right now. So all of this are things that aren't really captured by this matrix. These are very simplistic numbers, and it might make sense when you're talking about the rewards that you get from Olympus, the monetary rewards that you get, but it's still missing a lot of things that you need to include if you are to be making a game theoretic analysis. It cannot be just money.
With that in mind, what would be a correct mindset or correct game theory for any staking of any kind of crypto assets? So putting this aside, let's say we are talking about staking Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any of the big caps. What would be the appropriate, I think, takeaway when it comes to game theory and staking of like big caps, crypto?
The game theory aspect is that you need to be understanding, looking at the big picture, because otherwise you're going to be doing game theory, but bad game theory, because you're not be fully capturing everything in your model. So that's why it makes it a little bit harder to be making like this kind of one size fits all model that is always going to be correct. So this could be like other problems aside, like the payoffs for selling that are surely wrong. This could be an accurate representation for a few scenarios, but not going to be always the case. And in particular, the idea that people would always be staking and putting their money is ludicrous. There are going to be scenarios in which the orders are going to be selling, and you're going to want to be selling as well. So the big, really what define this matrix here is the sell payoff. It should not be -3. It should be the case that you need to have a Nash equilibrium of selling, which, as I said, you can see from the logic here that the previous two paragraphs, that he says that players are likely to sell when they anticipate a falling price, and selling moves the price down. So there should be some kind of positive here at sell. So that there are several equilibrium, and selling is one of them.
So if you to map like the different, like the crypto scene into this, so that there is obviously staking.
Sure.
Of course, there's trading with the buying and selling, somewhat similar to this, with the exception that better game theory numbers are placed into the graph itself, especially when it comes to the selling side. What would be a takeaway from game theory when it comes to trading and staking in crypto?
The takeaway is that I think that there are a few takeaways. The first one is that there are a few different equilibria that can happen in a situation like this. And this equilibria are volatile. All of them can be likely. If you think that everyone is going to be jumping on the hype, then jumping on the hype is a good thing. And be staking and essentially locking up your money and buying and holding. If you think that everyone doesn't see the value in that anymore and is going to be abandoning ship, particularly if the value that you saw didn't have enough real world foundations. If it was just speculative, then selling is a Nash equilibrium as well. Everyone just letting go of their asset and selling. And what really decides which one of these two kind of equilibriums is going to be played or should be played is the fundamentals. Because if you are going too far from the fundamentals, at some point, someone is going to say, okay, there's the value here. It's too crazy. I'm better off by buying something else, by selling this coin and buying a house, because I get better value for buying a house or buying stock from another company or buying a car or buying property, any other kind of asset class or any kind of usage, because it's too far away. And likewise, if everyone is selling and I didn't realize, oh my God, no, this cannot be the case. This is valuable. This is actually an opportunity for me. Think, for instance, that you have a bakery with a business partner, and the business partner decides I need to sell my part because I want to be paying for my wife's treatment. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, he's selling, I should be selling too. You should be like, no, this is good. Particularly if he's selling at discount, you feel just thinking, wow, he's selling at 50% price. It means that my bakery is not valuable anymore. If you're still selling the same number of bread, making the same kind of profit, then obviously you should be buying. This is what we're going to be selecting which of the two equilibria you're going between, either buying or selling. So this is one takeaway, that there are multiple equilibria, and which of the two equilibria you are depends on the intrinsic value. The second takeaway, it's what I hinted at the first, is that you need to be careful with game theory, because it's easy to be, as with anything in science really, to be making bad science, bad game theory. If you're just looking at specific instances. As people say, partial knowledge is more dangerous than ignorance, as you're going to be misled by what you think you understand, but you're still missing out many key details that completely reverse the conclusions that you should be taking. You can look at this and understand, I know roughly about game theory, and indeed these are the three largest numbers. I should be in one. It's more dangerous than if you really understand and realize, okay, they're missing out so many things from the picture. So partial knowledge is more dangerous than ignorance in some cases. I think that the last takeaway you can also have is that there is no asset class that you want to be holding forever. If someone says that, the price of this will always go up and you should always be holding, it's a real scam. Yes. Because someone is benefiting from this, for sure. And we can see a little bit of this in here when he goes here. Don't be the guy that sold Bitcoin at 50% at $50 to buy back at 20. Why not? Just why? I made $40 profit. Why shouldn't I be making a $30 profit? They just are like, bro, please don't sell it.
I think this is the peak of the bull market last cycle, where I think most people are, I would say, unrealistically optimistic. And to bring back your 3 points, I think the first point, given that crypto is very much speculative, yes, there are some hidden value and hidden gems here and there, but mostly it's speculative. I think we all agree on that bit.
Yeah.
So there is always, when it comes to game theory, there's always that bit where you want to be a bit more self-preserving, which kind of falls into the very initial part where you talk about on self-preservation. And I think the second point was, I think it happens in so many content pieces where everyone right now is like trying to establish themselves as a thought leader, myself included. And we don't have that formal training, right? We plug things here and there. We form our own education journey, and we don't know what we don't know. And that's dangerous, right? And which is why having such a platform, having white paper where we have different experts coming in to educate everyone and bring everyone up to a certain level is so important. Right, yourself especially, yes, in this particular podcast. So I think that's the two biggest takeaway I have from your point.
Firstly, this was super insightful in multiple ways. I think that last part, I feel like you said partial knowledge is worse than being ignorant. And sometimes I feel like I personally fall into this trap. I feel, you know what? I probably know a bit about this thing. But that's the worst thing to think. It's like the mega trap. And the other one that you mentioned, like thinking about this, like when you went into this, you're like, there's not really, none of this really makes sense. Or the parts that make sense, it seems like it seems so dumb. It's essentially saying, hey, if the price keeps going up, then we're all gonna get rich. It's something like that. And then you're like, oh shit, that's just not how life, nothing like that works. But then the question is, why did all these people buy in and lose their money? Is it just greed? And to me, an analogy that I see with this, it's like the people that are selling medicine, right? They're like, they're into that. They're like, yo, eat this thing and you're gonna live forever. Or eat this thing and you're gonna recover from liver disease and all this stuff. And as someone that's just like semi-educated, it can't be like that, right? I would never do it. But you see all these like older ladies or like older guys, they're always jumping into this stuff. Why? It's because they're afraid or they're greedy or they want that shortcut. And it's funny because it feels to me that we bought this medicine of, yo, we see this thing that said, a doctor said that this thing is going to help you live forever. And then we take it to an actual doctor. What the fuck? What did you say this thing does? But maybe there's clearly some people made money through this and some people didn't. But I think that was just my observation from all of this.
I think that on the super unachievable promises, it reminds me a little bit of a quote by Thomas Sowell. I think it's him that says that when people want the impossible, only liars can deliver. So yeah, people that are wanted to like this kind of magic formulas. I want to get rich without effort. I want to get thin. I want to live forever. When you want this kind of impossible things, the only people that are going to be offering you are the liars. And you talk about this. The other thing also that I think can explain a little bit is if you are a scammer of all of your money, then that's bad. But also the idea that it's so important to have a certain kind of goal that you are willing to risk because the risk is worth it. I used to explain this kind of like risk preference with university admission exams, where what matters is to get in the university. If you don't get in the university, doesn't matter if you fell short for 1 point or if you fell short by 100 points. It's worth to take the risk in some kind of questions, particularly in the case of my university, because it was really a risk. They had this kind of MCQ questions where every question that you get wrong takes away a question that you got right. It was really like a kind of a gamble. And for people, it's worth the gamble because it doesn't matter. Okay, I gambled, and if the gamble pays off, I'm in the university. If the gamble doesn't pay off, then it doesn't matter if I got off by 1 point or if I got off by 100 points. Same thing with lottery. If my only chance of becoming a millionaire is by playing the lottery, doesn't matter that the expected average is negative, that I'm like burning money. Because on the off chance that I do get to win a lottery, I get a larger reward. It's all about improving my chance. If I don't play in the lottery, my chance of becoming a millionaire is zero. Getting. But if I play the lottery, it goes from 0 to 0.1%. Therefore, I'm maximizing. If the only thing that I care about is the chance of becoming a millionaire, I'm maximizing the chances of becoming a millionaire by playing the lottery. So sometimes it goes back to what I mentioned of modeling the wrong thing. If you're trying to model expected reward, you would have the conclusion that you shouldn't be playing the lottery. But if you try to model chances of becoming a millionaire, then playing the lottery is the right move. And you really have to look into what that person cares about. Does the person is trying to maximize expected income, or is the person trying to maximize chances of becoming a millionaire?
Maybe game theory could be very simple. Once you have the points laid out, you just do plus minus. It's like simple math. But how you model these worlds seem to be the most important thing.
Yes.
And another thing that I saw with the chart is like, because it's only assuming a 2-player game here, right? Whereas in reality, it's like there could be like 1,000 players or 10,000 players. And as you said, each of them have different point system. If I was trading against the creator of the project, then for them, it's maybe it doesn't matter. I think it's quite interesting.